Flux Gourmet is a gorgeous gross-out erotic food movie that will floor you. By Nick Shagger. As mainstream cinema becomes increasingly dominated by a select few types of films, superhero extravaganzas, nostalgia exploiting IP tentpoles, and the occasional precious feel-good indie, the potential for genuine surprise has largely been lost. That's by design. Studios recognize that the more customers are prepared for what they've paid to see and are able to comfortably remain one step ahead of those entertainments, the more likely they are to enjoy them. Hence, for example, theatrical trailers and TV commercials that deliberately spoil crucial plot points, thrilling moments, and funny one-liners in advance. Predictability is safe and reliable, and thus the 2022 movie landscape is littered with projects designed to placate more than to shock and astonish. Someone, however, apparently forgot to impart this message to Peter Strickland, the British-born auteur whose feature-length works, Barbarian Sound Studio, The Duke of Burgundy, and In Fabric, are deliberately opaque and provocative. Strickland relishes operating on the fringe, where his anything-goes sensibility can flourish free from the constraints of the marketplace. He's a legitimate iconoclast, interested in taking detours that are as unnerving as they are unexpected, and that remains true with Flux Gourmet, June 24, an art world satire that's so far removed from today's multiplex fare that it feels like an active assault on the status quo. Deliriously demented and deviant, the writer-director's latest is a feast of the bizarre, a tale that both indulges in absurdist pretension while simultaneously poking fun at it, and makes no concessions to conventional notions of good taste and lucidity. Flux Gourmet is the rare film in which it's impossible to guess what each new scene will bring. From the start, Strickland provides no solid ground on which to stand, throwing audiences into the action in medias res via the sight of food sizzling on a pan and boiling in a pot. A woman's hand, replete with long, painted fingernails, waves over this stew like a witch tending to her cauldron. Then, we're presented with a general context for these early sights, a manor house where outrageously dressed Jan Stevens, Gwendoline Christie, functions as the financial patron of culinary sonic collectives, which are groups determined to artistically explore and experiment with sounds made by and with food. Her current clients are a trio comprised of leader L, Fatma Mohamed, acolyte Billy, Asa Butterfield, and protégé Lamina, Ariane Labd, who are introduced posing on stage in all-white gowns before a table decked out with cooking utensils, vegetables, and electronic audio equipment. Strickland doesn't bother explaining what a sonic collective is or how it operates. Rather, he simply drops viewers in the deep end, assuming they'll eventually attune themselves to his weirdo wavelength. That may be a difficult task for some, given the sheer strangeness of everything taking place in Flux Gourmet. Nonetheless, it's a daring gambit that by and large elicits curiosity regarding what the hell is going on in this secluded environ. As it turns out, the answer is that L, Billy and Lamina have been selected as Jan's promising understudies, and by providing them with freedom and support, Jan hopes they'll have some sort of inventive breakthrough regarding their objectives, which ostensibly have to do with traditional kitchen-related gender dynamics. This process, alas, is complicated by the fact that a rejected meat-centric collective known as the Mangrove Snacks is constantly terrorizing Jan, and that L resents Jan's attempts to interfere with her creativity. Jan and L's disagreement, which revolves around the proper modulation of a flanger, is the nominal subject of Flux Gourmet, which charts the fluctuating tensions between out-there artists and those who financially back their imaginative endeavors. That conflict can't help but come across as a cheeky articulation of Strickland's own experiences, and the writer-director's real-life history with a culinary-oriented collective known as the Sonic Catering Band, only further underscores his personal connection to this surreal lampoon of performance art nuttiness. Not that such backstory affiliations really matter. What's of prime importance here is the prankster-ish bravado with which Strickland stages his madness, much of it set to a score, by the filmmaker, Stereolab's Tim Gain, and a hawk and a hacksaw, that revels in distorted, abstract frying and bubbling noise. With a degree of self-referential artifice that's Strickland's stock in trade, Flux Gourmet delivers a series of wacko left-field developments, be it Billy recounting a childhood encounter with an omelet-making chef that forever rocked his psychosexual world, or Elle's decision to smear herself with what appears to be fecal matter in front of an audience in an act of incendiary offensiveness. The entire film is told through the eyes and narrated in Greek voiceover words of Stone, Makis Papadimitriou, a hack writer, hired by Jan to document the thoughts, feelings, and deeds of the collective, whom he interviews one-on-one. Stone admits that he's not a journalist, and that he doesn't know the exact purpose he serves. He spends the majority of his time fretting greatly over his incurable gas, about which he expounds in detail, discussing the ways in which he hides his farts, sounds, and smells from those around him, and his dismay over the inability of pompously erudite Dr. Glock, Richard Bremmer, to find a remedy for his flatulence. Stone's internal affliction is a source of regular humor, and moreover, it speaks to Flux Gourmet's fascination with internal and external artistic and emotional expressions and blockages. It also culminates with a public colonoscopy conducted without anesthesia, the inside of Stone's organs projected on a wall for all to see. While it's not always easy to grasp what Strickland is going for, that's almost irrelevant, since the lunacy of every incident, speech, and routine is so great that it's pleasurable enough to simply go with the freakish flow. From Christie's cartoonishly outlandish costumes, including a hooded silken nightgown that makes her resemble Star Wars Bib Fortuna, to erotic montages of cooking food and performative transgressions that are followed by dreamy orgies, Flux Gourmet imagines the battles between art and commerce, the authentic and gimmicky, and collaboration and independence with witty audacity and at least one gastro-gross-out showstopper. Be sure to see it with an open mind, and on an empty stomach. To Leslie is a surprising sudden Oscar contender that deserves all the praise. Over the last week, you may have seen some of your favorite celebrities plugging a movie you've never even heard of with the fervent passion they usually reserve for holiday cards or caffeinated beverages. Stars with huge industry cachet like Jane Fonda, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Sarah Paulson have flocked to social media to buoy To Leslie, a shoestring-budget 2022 film that they believe should be up for consideration among Academy voters ahead of next week's Oscar nominations. And more than just the movie itself, they're bandying about its star, Andrea Riseborough. The film, in which Riseborough plays an alcoholic single mother struggling to put her life together after winning the lottery, earned rave reviews from critics last year. Despite the praise, it earned a paltry box office total of less than $30,000 worldwide, and had all but faded from the conversation following its March 2022 release. And now, nearly a year later, celebrities are jumping on the bandwagon too. I was bowled over by Andrea Riseborough's brave and unsparing performance, Fonda wrote on Instagram. Paltrow and her friend Demi Moore even screened the film together with Riseborough and director Michael Morris in attendance, which they then posted about on their respective Instagram accounts. Naturally, Twitter has taken notice too, memeing Sarah Paulson's claims that To Leslie is a small film with a giant heart. But, let's face it, celebrities have been known to be out of touch. I write about the art they make for a living, but I can't take everything they say as gospel. So, after kicking myself for not having seen To Leslie already myself, I heated Mini Driver using my favorite turn of phrase, run, don't walk, and fired up the film. I'll be damned, the celebrities were right. To Leslie, and especially Riseborough, is a triumph of indie cinema. To Leslie opens with a montage of portraits of a woman whose life has been anything but easy. We see photos of Leslie, Riseborough, as she grew up, went to her high school prom, got pregnant early, and eventually ended up a struggling single mother after escaping an abusive relationship. The sequence ends with local news footage of Leslie after she wins $190,000 in the lottery. When the reporter asks what she'll do with the money, a frenzied Leslie responds, "Maybe buy a house, buy something nice for my boy, just have a better life." A muffled call from a bystander rings out, and Leslie shouts to the crowd that drinks are on her. 6 years later, Leslie has pissed all of the money away and is getting kicked out of the motel she lives in, for failing to pay her rent on time. Faced with being unhoused, Leslie goes where she knows she might be able to pick someone up, the bar. It doesn't hurt that they might pay for her tab, either, and she knows how to try to make herself look appealing when a group of handsome strangers walk through the door. Soon enough, Leslie is back out on the street, and she uses the last of her cash to phone her son, James, Owen Teague. Getting in touch with her only child is Leslie's last resort. Despite her disease, she knows that she doesn't want to involve her child in her own mess. She's good for a day or two in James's apartment, convincing him that she's not drinking like she used to. But before long, the malevolent call of addiction clouds her better judgment, and Leslie starts rummaging for drinking money in pants pockets and wallets. Riseborough floats through these early scenes with almost eerie expertise. The fog of a perma-hungover addict, genuinely trying to hide her disease from the one person she loves most in the world, hangs on her face like a curse she can't shake. Eventually, it gets so heavy that it weighs her back down into the dark, and Riseborough's eyes come alive again when Leslie has her first taste of alcohol in a couple of days. James, who's only 19, can no longer tolerate seeing his mother go in and out of this stupor. He takes on the painful responsibility of having the police escort her to the bus station, where he's arranged for family friends Nancy, Allison Janney, and Dutch, Stephen Root, to take her in once she reaches their hometown. Leslie quickly squanders that as well, and ends up sleeping outside another motel. In the morning, she's chased off the property by Sweeney, Mark Maron, and Royal, Andre Royo, the motel's operators. But with nowhere else to go, Leslie lurks around the motel grounds until Sweeney takes pity on her, offering her a housekeeping job. Maron has always been adept at playing disarmingly amiable grumps, and his performance here leans toward the softer side of the spectrum his roles have crafted. His work opposite Riseborough is electric and believably sweet, making the scenes between Leslie and Sweeney welcome, tender touches against the film's harder edges. But, like every white woman in Hollywood has said over the last week, it's Riseborough who runs away with the film, particularly in scenes where she's left to her own devices. She transforms a trope that we've seen in film countless times before, the self-destructive single mother, into its own singular character study, rising to the occasion every time the camera focuses on her. In one particular sequence, just before Leslie hits rock bottom, Riseborough all but clinches her Oscar nomination. Leslie sits in the bar after Last Call, listening to Willie Nelson's "Are You Sure?" playing over the jukebox. Riseborough never utters a single word, only takes an occasional puff on her cigarette, but the emotion that runs across Leslie's pained face says everything and more. If there were any justice, and the Oscars ceremony didn't only include acting clips with nominees speaking, this would be Riseborough's contender reel. The film itself isn't quite as strong as Riseborough's performance, just teetering on the edge of melodrama throughout. But at its few weakest points, To Leslie is propped up by the strengths of its strong cast and Ryan Binaco's dexterous script, which balances humor and tough-love despondency. Janney only appears in a handful of scenes opposite Riseborough, eliciting a small chuckle every time we see her hardened, sunburned while wearing sunglasses visage. But the work she does, particularly in the final act, proves that the film understands that even its tertiary characters are capable of providing an effective punch of real, potent emotion. To Leslie doesn't take any shortcuts, either. This is a full 120-minute affair. And that's a good thing. We watch Leslie try to pick up the pieces of her broken life, stumbling along the way. We're graced with enough time to understand the way Leslie's disease affects her, as addiction affects no two people the same way, and root for her despite constant mistakes. Unlike other recent Oscar pushes, the real, human pain is not brushed aside for a tidy ending. Leslie doesn't end up fresh as a daisy, never desiring another drop of alcohol again. Nobody saves her. But we see the real and courageous work that she does to point herself toward some semblance of recovery. The result is an arresting film. It's no wonder that so many stars seem to be genuinely captivated by it. A movie like this can wear its runtime like a weight chained to its ankle, but To Leslie ebbs and flows with distinctly natural pacing. Its final scene is brimming with authenticity, with the ensemble cast all performing at the top of their game. But it's always Riseborough's enchanting eyes that tether the camera to her, proving that she has what it takes to compete among this year's buzziest contenders. If she does score an Oscar nomination, we'll find out on January 24th, it'll be more than earned.